Hello everyone, welcome back to this channel. Today I'd like us to talk about antimicrobial resistance. Antimicrobial resistance is causing an economic burden both in the low and middle income countries as well as the high income countries. From the lessons we learned from COVID-19, a disease can quickly spread and affect the whole world within a very short time. Remember how COVID-19 spread from China to the rest of the world within a very short period. COVID-19 caught people unaware or unprepared. However, antimicrobial resistance is a problem that has been existing for some time now, and its dangers can be predicted. Reports indicate that more than 80% of antimicrobial deaths related occur in the low and middle income countries, and it is projected that such deaths will continue to occur, and 4 million will happen in Africa and 4 million will happen in Asian countries by the year 2050. Antimicrobial resistance is exacerbated by overuse of antibiotics. It occurs when the microorganisms like bacteria, fungi, parasites, and viruses evolve over time. So the antimicrobials that were eventually used to treat the infections are no longer effective. Eventually, the infection spread and become very difficult to treat. In 1928, Alexander Fleming discovered the first antibiotic, that is penicillin, and within 2 years penicillins were available in the global market. Some of the antibiotics that are penicillin based include amoxicillin, ampicillin, injectables like crystalline or benzyl penicillin, benzathine penicillin, just to mention but a few. And like I've said, antimicrobial resistance has become the biggest threat of global health. It is a threat to food security as well as development. So in less than 100 years since the development of the antibiotics, the world is now faced with a crisis that might end up being more devastating than even the COVID-19. This is because many drugs that were previously being used to treat the infections have become less effective against those infections. However, we can say there are some efforts being put in place to find new forms of treatment to eliminate these pathogens, but this might take some time. So what happens in the meanwhile? That is the question we are supposed to grapple with. Antimicrobial resistance affects all countries globally. However, some countries experience the devastating effects more than others, and economic factors come into play here. For instance, in sub-Saharan Africa, most of the countries have borne the heaviest burden. Even in the US, at least 2.8 million people develop antibiotic-resistant infections every year. This according to Bulat and his colleague in their 2022 publication. Other countries also are affected because of easy movement across borders, and therefore containing the spread of drug-resistant infections has become very difficult. We saw this with the COVID-19, where within a short time the infection spread from China to the rest of the countries across the globe. In 2023, antibiotic-resistant strains of Klebsiella, that is a bacteria that is responsible for pneumonia, meningitis, bloodstream infection, commonly known as septicemia, among others, spread across the US. This is according to Bulate and his colleague. Therefore, there is urgent need for more innovative, high-quality antimicrobials since the resistance is spreading very fast and the medicines that were previously being used to treat the infections have become less effective. So what causes antimicrobial resistance, or what are the factors associated with antimicrobial resistance? One is natural variation in the genetic makeup of these microorganisms. These microorganisms continue to reproduce, and alterations in their DNA could mean that the antimicrobials cannot reach the cells of these microorganisms, or the alterations make the microorganisms capable of creating enzymes that destroy the antimicrobials. So you keep giving an antimicrobial, but the enzymes produced by these microorganisms keep destroying the antimicrobials. So you end up doing nothing. Instead of treating the patient, you are doing nothing. Through natural selection also, these microorganisms will proliferate over time over the less resistant strains, spreading the genetic advantage further. And this is mostly seen with the microorganisms that have advantageous traits. Microorganisms like bacteria are also capable of transferring their genetic materials directly to each other in different ways other than through reproduction that I've talked about. The other cause is associated with the poor use of antibiotics or antimicrobials, and this can exacerbate development and spread of the resistance. If an individual does not use the antibiotic or the antimicrobial as required, for instance, if the prescription says it is supposed to be taken 3 times a day or 4 times a day, so 3 times a day means every 8 hours, and this has to be adhered to. If it is 4 times a day, it means every 6 hours. Nothing less than that, nothing more than that. But if the individual takes it in the contrary, or fail to take the full course of this antimicrobial, they will not kill off the infection. And this leaves behind the microorganisms that will take advantage and fight against the medicine. These microorganisms will then multiply and pass on their survival tactics, therefore killing them with the same medicine or medicine that are in the group of the medicine that have already been misused. Treating this will become very difficult. The other cause is poor stewardship and monitoring practices. This is especially seen among the low and middle income countries, where guidelines regarding antimicrobial use are available but they are not adhered to. You find that some healthcare providers prescribe antibiotics when there is even no indication, there is no evidence that this individual or this patient has a bacterial infection. There are also instances where the small private pharmaceutical outlets sell or dispense medicines even at half dose or even less than half a dose. You also find the same, I don't mean all but some. They have employed non-qualified staff to prescribe and dispense these antimicrobials. So all this will exacerbate resistance. Nearly 50% of antibiotics that are used to treat patients are given wrongly, and even some are given without definitive diagnosis. Some of the limitations, however, are as a result of laxity to implement these rules, inadequate resources. Some are due to limited mechanisms to audit rational prescription, sale of these products, and even utilization of the medicines. The other issues are related to availability and utilization of diagnostic tools. In some cases, you find that the diagnostic tools are unavailable, they are not there, so the healthcare workers just prescribe antibiotics without even any evidence of a bacterial infection. Others are because of underutilization of these diagnostic tools. You find, especially among patients who are paying for healthcare services out of their pockets, you find that sometimes they don't have money to pay for these investigations. So without money, the investigations cannot be done, and therefore prescriptions of antibiotics are done without evidence of a microbial infection. And this is where now the oversight role or the stewardship role should come in, to ensure that all efforts should be made to ensure there is evidence, enough evidence to show that an individual has a bacterial infection before any antibiotic is prescribed to them. The other factor is introducing antibiotics into the environment. People are nowadays using antibiotics to the animals, either to treat their animals or to expedite their growth. For example, chicken, and even cows, goats, sheep, all these domestic animals. There are people who treat them with antibiotics, and then if they are consumed, you are already consuming the antibiotics, and yet you don't need even the antibiotics in the first place. So you've consumed the antibiotics indirectly from the food products or from the plants. There are also companies like the pharmaceutical companies that dispose antibiotics into the water that are later used by individuals within the communities. So in such cases, we also get resistance from there because of that exposure to those antibiotics. The other factor is the unsustainable innovation ecosystem. It is required that countries should ensure that there are new molecules of antimicrobials over a decade, at least 15. And out of these, 4 should be those of the targeted bacterial species by the WHO. So these drugs should have new chemicals or differentiated modes of action compared with the ones that are currently in use. If this innovation ecosystem is not sustained, then resistance will continue to develop and spread without even having mitigation measures in place. So what are the effects of antimicrobial resistance? Imagine you have an infection, let's say pneumonia or meningitis, or even a throat infection that is caused by streptococci, and you don't have drugs to treat them. What will happen to you? It means that you'll continue being sick, and this will compromise your quality of life. You'll become less productive, you'll not be able to do anything, you cannot attend to your normal duties, so your productive life will be wasted because of this infection that cannot be treated, just because you've developed antimicrobial resistance. In a 2019 study, 141,000 deaths in high-income countries occurred, and this was related directly to antibacterial resistance. This is found in a publication by Bishen in 2023. In the same study, 1.27 million deaths occurred globally due to antimicrobial resistance. This means that the antimicrobial resistance had higher mortality rate than HIV and AIDS or malaria. It is estimated that by 2050, antimicrobial associated deaths will be 10 million. Remember what I said about African countries and Asian countries. They were to have 4 million deaths each by 2050. But globally, it is estimated it will be 10 million. This is a very big number that we should be worried of. Losing 10 million people, should get worried of that. Others are because of global economy, which will also be affected by this antimicrobial resistance. This is due to increased healthcare cost, because remember, when there is total resistance, new modes of or new novel antibiotics will have to be found, and the cost will not be that affordable to majority of our countries, especially the low and middle income countries. So this cost will have an impact on the economy, and even the productivity of individuals, like I've said, it will be compromised because of the illnesses. In the end, poverty levels will also increase, and to the global gross domestic product, it is estimated that approximately $3.4 trillion will be lost, and additional 24 million people will be exposed to extreme poverty. This according to World Health Organization. So how do you manage antimicrobial resistance? First is to have global coordination. It is required that the coordination at global level should deal with the increase in antimicrobial resistance and to expedite the development of new or novel medicines. There's also the need for all countries to work together to ensure health systems globally are prepared for the increasing resistance and even the increasing level of infections. The other measure is to push for innovations. This can be done by subsidizing those who have invested in ensuring that the novel medicines are available. This can be done through government grants or even giving incentives to these organizations or individuals or countries that are involved in innovating the new medicines. Can also leverage on existing research and development, whether it is from the public or even the private, through a public-private collaboration. Should also ensure availability and access to these novel antibiotics once they have been produced. We know that registering and availing new medicines into the market is tedious, but learning from the COVID-19 vaccines, this was expedited, and the same can apply to the novel antibiotics. There can be easy and inexpensive registration into the markets with unmet needs. There should be equitable global access and enhanced public-private partnership among the low and middle-income countries, because this is where the highest burden is borne. There is also need to encourage the pull system or the right pull incentives, and this can go a long way towards increasing ecosystem sustainability and effectiveness. However, this requires an effective implementation model to ensure alignment with the public health objectives. In the case of antibiotics specifically, to develop adequate pool, policymakers may need to decouple reward from actual use by devising a market model that incentivizes the development of these novel drugs, by even purchasing significant quantities without expectation of immediate consumption. Can put them as a stock, as a buffer. Then there should be country-specific considerations. Every country should come up with the solutions to antimicrobial resistance that reflect local healthcare system realities. Any model developed in this regard need to sustain funding from other sources apart from what the government budgets allocate for the health systems. The model should be tailored to local health system needs and processes to ensure access and incentives for the local supply chain. Oversight role or activities should also be strengthened, like we've seen with the causes of antimicrobial resistance. One of the gap was weak oversight roles. So this should be strengthened to ensure that the rational use of antibiotic guidelines are adhered to. The same should apply to waste management measures, including water and sanitation, and where possible all water sources should be treated. Before this, is the final one is to do target pathogen and solutions. Where we know that WHO have a priority pathogen list provided on the basis for identifying target pathogens. An antimicrobial scientific committee composed of leading infectious disease experts, scientists from top contributing countries, and representatives from international organizations could complement this highly valuable work by providing guidance on the values of target pathogens globally to help individual countries avoid ranking and incentivizing these innovations differently. Countries could then assign and align on the total aggregate dollar value of each product profile. WHO requires that the target pathogen list be updated every 3 to 5 years. So with that, we come to the end of this presentation. We should ensure that every country take it as a priority to ensure that there are measures in place to curtail the continuing development and spread of the antimicrobial resistance, because this is a problem that has more devastating effects than what was witnessed with COVID-19. I therefore welcome any comments from the experts or inputs from the experts on this topic. So with that, I just want to urge you to continue watching more of these videos for such information. So remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Thank you very much. Let's meet in my next presentation.